Welcome to another Sunday Extra podcast with Hope Church. My name is Brian Kropp. I'm one of the associate pastors. With me is our lead pastor, Matt Sturdivant. And this past Sunday, we started a brand new initiative called Pray, Invest, and Invite. And this is a part of our mission as a church. Our mission statement is that we are inviting people to discover and experience God's ways. And so the verb or the action that we can take is invitation. So we're doing that. We looked at a variety of ways to do those invitations, but I was going to ask you, Matt, if you could sort of recap, because it's been a few days, why is this the initiative to invest and invite, as opposed to, say, go into all of the world and uproot your lives and move somewhere where a tribe doesn't know Jesus? Why is it seems so simple or possibly insignificant just to say invite somebody to your house for dinner or something? Why is this the initiative?
Yeah, well, I think the main qualifier, though, is with the intention and the purpose to show and share the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
So, God has not called everyone to uproot their lives and go to the jungle somewhere. He calls people to do that, absolutely. But when you look at Jesus, sort of the Great Commission that we find in each of the Gospels and the book of Acts, which we looked at on Sunday, the common theme is go and tell.
Mm-hmm.
And we have people all around us that we can go and tell. And sometimes it's more, we don't have to go, we just have to tell. So to have an audience to tell, we need to have people. So one of the things I'm trying to do is look at the reality of the world that we live in right now.
Mm-hmm.
We're still, this is the spring of 2021. COVID is still a thing.
It's still a thing.
There are, travel restrictions and bans, or maybe it's just not wise to travel to certain parts. Right. In fact, we have some friends who do feel called to go to places very far from here, and they're waiting on visas right now because the country that they're going into is not issuing any new visas. So that part is a little bit more difficult today with today's reality, but we still have people all around us. So we want to invite people into our lives and invite them to show them the love of Christ, with also the intention to share the gospel with them. But the first thing that it may not be right to just, I walk up to my neighbor who maybe I don't have much of a relationship with, mm-hmm. and tell them, you are a sinner and you are going to hell. Let me tell you about Jesus. That may not be the most effective method.
It's a good relationship builder. Yeah.
Yes. So instead of, basically there are so many things we can't do right now.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do?
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do with this initiative is pray. We've been talking all throughout the spring of last year. I mean, I think, probably hopefully the next most remembered statement besides our mission statement that you say at least every week, and I try to say it almost every week. The next thing that hopefully people remember is me saying, if you don't know what to do, you can always pray.
Mm-hmm.
And so prayer is something we can do anytime, anywhere. We can pray for anyone. It doesn't matter what is going on in the world around us. In fact, often I will be laying in my bed in the morning when it's time to get out of my bed, and the first thing I do is pray, and sometimes that prayer is, oh God, please help me get out of the bed right now. So we can pray anytime, but if we specifically pray for people in our lives, so pray and then invest in relationships. And one of the big things that we're doing with this initiative is this isn't go find the people.
Mm-hmm.
Now some may have literally no one in their life who's not yet a follower of Jesus. And if that's the case, well, then you need to pray that God would bring some people to you and show you who that is. But the rest of us, we all have people in our lives already, and we have varying degrees of a relationship with them who they either probably don't know Jesus, or we know that they don't know Jesus. So this isn't like go out and look for them. It's just be aware of who's already in your life. Who do you already have a relationship with? So you're praying for that person, and then you're intentionally taking steps with that relationship, and that could look a variety of different ways. And then, so pray, invest, and invite. And then the ultimate invitation is an invitation to meet Jesus.
Right.
But there may be lots of other invitations that happen before we get to that point.
When you mentioned too, I think this has been true in my life, and I've heard this is not terribly uncommon, that as you're walking with the Lord over time, the friendships that you've built tend to be, godly and Christ-centered, and because you need those relationships in your life to encourage you to keep walking forward faithfully with Christ. And if you're not careful, or like right now, I would easily fall into this category of, I've got 4 kids, that takes up a lot of time. I have more than a full-time job and those kinds of things. So having just a robust amount of different kinds of relationships with people at different levels of spiritual growth, that's maybe difficult at different times in life. But I was talking with Glenda, my wife. She's like, we don't know a lot of people who don't know Jesus, but we do have people who don't know Jesus who are walking in the building every week. And so it doesn't always have to be, let me go hunt down the barista at Starbucks and pray that they don't know Jesus so I can share the gospel with them, or the checkout lady at the grocery store or whatever. There are people who are coming into the building every week who are looking. And I think what's interesting in this time with, all the answers you want are on Google. You can troll all the people that you want to on social media. You can find the best speakers of Jesus ever on the internet. If someone is willing to get in a car and drive to a church and they don't know Jesus, they are looking for something. And that invitation may be a little easier than maybe it was even 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had different forms of this over the years, and we haven't really talked about it a whole lot in the last, definitely the last year. But, even just taking the first 5 minutes after a church service and intentionally look around for people that you don't know. Now, it could be that they have been a part of our church for years and you just never met them, and they could be a member of the church, and they could love Jesus and be trying to share him with others. But just look for people here, like you're talking about, that, hey, I don't recognize that person. And then, we wear name tags here at Hope, so that's really helpful to know the person's name. So I could walk up to you if I didn't know you and say, hey, Brian, I don't think we've met before. I'm Matt. But even if we didn't have name tags on, I could just walk up and say, hi, I'm Matt. I don't think we've met before. And then, the natural thing would be is, maybe I probably wouldn't reach my hand out like this right now, but give you, whatever. But the point is that if I say, hi, I'm Matt, I don't think we've met, and you're here, you're going to say, hi, Matt, I'm Brian.
Yeah.
And then you're either going to say, we did meet and whatever, or, yeah, I don't think we met either. And we strike up a conversation, and then I'll be able to, learn a little bit about your story. Like, hey, well, what do you do for work?
It's interesting, though. Sometimes on Sunday morning, I've run into people that I have met, but because they're wearing masks, I don't know that I've met them because it obscures the face. And then I find out, I'm sorry, I met you a while ago. I'm ignorant. But, there are people here, that are coming in to. So that's good. I was going to ask you a little bit about teaming, because I think we talk about that too. It's easy to take the full load of responsibility of talking to people about Jesus. It's all on me. I've got to carry out the Great Commission all on my own, and it discounts the ability that, say, you and I have. So I may not know anybody, but you know some people, and maybe if if we all know the same friends, then that person gets to hear about the gospel from different perspectives and gets to see the gospel lived out in different ways. And I don't know if you could talk a little bit about the importance of teaming or how to team, particularly in you don't know where people are with personal contact and being in the same space and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think when it comes to teaming, there's a variety of different ways that can happen. Before we go there, though, I would say, as a follower of Jesus, each one of us are responsible for telling people about Jesus, the ones that God brings in our path and gives us opportunities. Now, some of us have the gift of evangelism, and it's just like the most natural thing to talk about. And if you have a friend, if you don't have the gift of evangelism and you know someone who does, then you just it's amazing. Like, they can be talking about dirt, and then all of a sudden the conversation naturally flows to Jesus. They share the gospel, and then the person accepts Christ right then and there. And then those who don't have the gift of evangelism are like we're even talking about spiritual things, or we're talking about something going really hard, and it's like, now what do I say? I don't know what to say. So we're each responsible to do it, but we have different gifts. But that's where teaming comes in. So, I know I have gone to, I've been invited to go to the movies before. Obviously, this was pre-COVID, and went and watched a movie, and I don't even remember exactly what the movie was about, but I know that I went with a fellow church member, and they had a friend that they really weren't sure where they were spiritually. So we went and watched this movie that didn't necessarily have anything to do with anything. It wasn't like a great spiritual movie.
Right.
And then we went, and I don't know if we got a meal or coffee. I don't remember exactly. And then we were just talking about life and stuff, and trying to get a sense of, so this person who's a church member has a friend that they were concerned about and wanted them to know Jesus, and they were introducing them to another one of their friends who did know Jesus. So this is where working together as a team. If you have a bunch of friends who don't know Jesus and you don't know what to say, well, how can you facilitate something? Invite them to something where you can have a couple of your friends who maybe do have the gift of evangelism. So just working together, and then maybe, some people, I like, well, how do I get into that conversation? They're unsure of, but once the conversation turns, they know what to say.
Right. So
that person can team with others, and we can all work together. I remember I was overseas once, and this particular time I got to share the gospel and lead someone in the prayer to receive Jesus. But the backstory of that was that there had been many, 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 many conversations with this particular individual by the missionaries that we were working with, by other people. I just happened to be there the day. And, of course, I was American, and this culture we were in, Americans were thought of as very highly. So it was like, hey, to this person, hey, here's our American friend. He knows Jesus. Matt, why don't you tell him about your relationship with Jesus? And I did. And then, it was like, is that something you'd like to do? And well, yeah. And I led him in the prayer right then and there. Well, there had been much, much work that happened before that. So this is why in the message I mentioned briefly, and those things to consider about at the end, that people are in different places spiritually. Some people we meet and have a conversation with may be very hard and opposed to the gospel for a variety of different reasons, and it's going to take a whole lot of time and investment and conversation by many people and God working in their life. Other times we meet someone who they're just like, well, just tell me what I need to say. I'm ready to accept Jesus.
Right.
That happened to be one of those instances. Yeah. And I will say that it seems like that more frequently happens when you're overseas. And that's how we think it's supposed to be here, if you've gotten to have that experience. But it doesn't always happen that way. So someone could be 1 step away, someone could be 5 steps away, someone could be 10 steps away. The point is that we're faithful in taking our next steps in relating with the person that is before us with the moments that we have.
Well, the you mentioned that each one of the gospel books in the Bible has a Great Commission statement from Jesus. They all state it slightly differently, but it's all from Jesus, essentially saying, as you go about your life, be helping people come to faith in Christ, to become growing in their faith, to be baptized, and um, um, oh man, I lost my train of thought. It's terrible. I'm getting old, man. I'm getting so
A few more gray hairs
old.
there.
Oh well, it's in that flow of life and I think this is what I was thinking of was those four knots.
Yes.
That I thought that was a really helpful tool to be. It's really easy just to live your life. I'm waking up, I do my stuff, and I go to bed, and it's all about me. And what I liked about the four knot, like you're intentionally listening to. I've got people around me that I don't know where they are with Jesus. Even if I know that they're going to church and they probably have accepted Christ, I could still be listening for these statements because people still need to be encouraged to keep taking their next steps with the Lord. But that changes the intentionality. I'm listening for certain things so that I can invite them further to discover and experience.
Mm-hmm.
Could you go back over those four
Sure.
real quick?
Yeah, this and I, full disclosure, I did not create those. I like to think of myself as finding the gold out there, mining it, and then sharing the gold with others. So I can't remember exactly who I heard say that, but it was a pastor at another church. He was sharing an illustration about inviting people, and he, in the clip that I saw, he had this great big like boating rope, and he's making these great big knots on the stage, and so you listen for people who they're not doing well. If someone says they're not doing well, something ain't going right in their life.
Yeah.
And you want to listen. And maybe you can offer to pray for them, or you listen to what they say and ask them, say, well, tell me more about that. And well, how do you get through that? And I mean, you just listen and you can ask some questions. We're not from around here. This area that we live, we're in Fort Worth. This DFW Metroplex in the last 10 years has grown by like close to 1 million people. So there are a lot of people not from around here.
Yeah.
And when you move into a new area, guess what? You left your friends, you left your family, you left your maybe your church. You left everybody wherever you came from.
Mm-hmm.
So as you meet people and they're not from around here, well, they're probably looking for friends. They're probably looking for relationship connection. So it's a great potential invite. They're not prepared for what's next. That means that there's some type of a transition that they're either in or they're about to go through. So it could be, I'm about to have my first kid, I'm about to get married, I'm about to add another kid, I'm about to get a new job, change job, retire. But whatever it is, they don't feel prepared for what's on the horizon, for what's next. So that's the time people are open. And then the last one is just they're not in church. I remember talking to a guy, and I invited him to come to Hope, and he says, well, I don't go to church. And I'm like, well, that's okay. There's lots of people who don't go to church who have come to Hope, and so I just turn that around. Like, I mean, that's what we don't want to just steal people from other churches. That's not what we're trying to do. But when he self-identified that he didn't go to church, I'm like, this is the exact guy that I want to invite to come to church.
Yeah.
Now, to my knowledge, he's never come, but I made the invitation. And that's one of the other points I was talking about was, like, we're responsible for the invitation, not for the outcome. So when I invited him to come, I was being faithful and obedient to the opportunity that Jesus gave me, but I'm not responsible for him accepting that invitation and coming. So I don't feel bad about myself because he didn't come. I wish he would come, and I pray that he still would come at some point, but that's not like on my bad that he didn't come, because I was faithful to make the invitation.
And as particularly in the book of Acts, where that's the story of the start of the church, I remember there was a training exercise that we did in this training thing we had called North Star, and the scenario was the Apostle Paul has come into your town, and he's maybe spent 3 months, maybe 6 months, and he's caused enough stress on the system that the town has run him out. He's gone now, and you're left to yourselves. What are you going to do next? And I think, in that scenario, there was this understanding of there was persecution, like legit, you're going to go to jail, possibly torture. Like it's bad. Whatever we are feeling is persecution in the United States in 2021. It ain't whatever they were talking about in persecution in the book of Acts. But there was still that intentionality of this means so much. What Christ has done in my life, the transformation that he's allowed, the hope and the peace and the perspective, all of that, it's so important that as I'm selling fish or as I'm making nets or as I'm doing whatever I was doing back in first century Greece or that area, I needed to make that invitation that they're all around. And the same is true in 2021 in Fort Worth, that, as I'm getting gas, as I'm getting my oil changed, as I'm around those folks, and to be listening intentionally for, particularly, I thought a lot of those knots have really been heightened for people who in 2019 were fine.
Yeah.
And they're now not doing well, and they have moved from somewhere else, and they're not in church. I mean, there's a ton of that now, that just the year that we've all gone through, we pushed those out.
Yeah, we've got a lot of people who are not doing well right now because of isolation, because of just all the effects of the last, we're coming up on a year. We've got a lot of people who still aren't from around here. Maybe they even had to move. We got a lot of people who aren't prepared for what's next. Maybe they lost their job, all that, and then if they're not in church either. So the opportunity is actually, I think, is greater than it's ever been, because the need that people are feeling, feeling and experiencing in their lives, the level of just level of need for something else. Knowing that whatever else is out there, like, it ain't doing it, and so I think that the need is greater, so then people are ready to receive. I think another thing when it comes to inviting is, you and I work together, and throughout the week, you'll have found this really great YouTube video, right? And you're like, hey, come here, you got to see this thing. This is hilarious. Or I'll come and show you something, or this meme I found, or whatever it is. Here's the thing, is that we naturally want to share things with other people that we think are helpful to them or will be interesting to them, or even if it's just, hey, I don't know if this is going to be helpful or interesting to you, but this means a lot to me. Well, what we're talking about here is we're talking about our faith in Christ and our relationship with him. And this is like the most important thing in our life. And we're talking about sharing it with others. So just like we would share with them all these other great things in life, this is even more important than that. More important than talking about this great restaurant that I went to, or this great YouTube video that really made me laugh and I watched it 800 times. You got to see this. This is like, hey, we're talking about eternity. We're talking about meaning and purpose. We're talking about being able to have a right relationship with God, our Creator. So this is so important that we just want to share it with others. Now, share it naturally in the flow, but it's an important thing that we share. We want to invite people at whatever level and whatever invitation is appropriate in the moment. So one of the things I've been saying, I think that in some ways the invitation to church is actually a lot easier now than it's ever been, because if that's where someone is, the invitation is, here's a link to a message that I found really, really helpful. And I think based on what we've been talking about, or what you've shared with me, I think that you'll find this helpful as well. And the really great thing, we all have different levels of tech ability, but all the messages, they're on our website, they're on our podcast. We also have a YouTube channel, so you can find just the message itself online on YouTube. cue it up to the exact place that you think is most helpful. So then you can, when you say copy that link, it asks you down there, do you want to start the copy at 10 minutes and 28 seconds? And if that's the part you think your friend will really benefit from, cue it up to that and say, I listened to this message that I think you'll find really helpful, and I've started it right where I think you'll find it most helpful. Well, guess what? They don't have to listen to the whole thing. They can just listen to that statement, and then if they're like, wow, that was helpful, what did he say before that? And maybe they go back to the beginning. Maybe they don't find it helpful at all. Okay, they didn't find it helpful. But
you made the
how
invitation.
easy was that to just send the link to make the invitation?
So I was reading a book that had nothing to do with Bible or anything like that, but it essentially said that if you want to do anything good in life or with your life, it's going to be difficult. There's going to be a voice inside of you that says, that's the dumbest thing you could do. You shouldn't do that. But if you want to do something meaningless, doors are open. Walk right through. We don't care. And I think, at least, as you're talking, for me, it's super easy to share about this really cool pizza I ate or this stupid video because I know there's no real lasting meaning in it. I'm not really risking a lot. But if I share something that is personal, like my faith with Christ, with someone who I don't know if they're now going to reject me as a friend or think I'm crazy or whatever, that becomes harder. But probably the hardness of that inner voice that's saying, don't do that, is a possibly a good cue that this is actually more valuable. This is more important to push through. And like you say, texting a link to a YouTube video that's queued up and ready to go, that's about as easy as it gets. You don't have to stare them in the face at that moment. You can talk about later. You already have an in. Like, hey, did you get a chance to watch that video I sent? You don't have to start from nothing. Like, oh, hey, come over and watch my computer as I try to awkwardly get into talking about the gospel. There's a thing. Hey, I was at church on Sunday. I thought this was really helpful, and from what you and I were talking about, it seemed like this would be helpful too. Check it out.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that goes along with this is just actually really listening to where people are at. I mean, we all know, like, someone says, hey, how's it going? What's up? And you're like, fine, good. But when you actually take time to listen to someone, and it's like, no, hey, Brian, how are you doing, man? How are you really doing? And now, obviously, depending on the depth of our relationship, that will impact the depth of what you share. But I've at least opened up the door where you may not tell me all the stuff, but if I'm like, no, how you really doing? And you're like, it's really been hard. And then you share like something with me that I didn't previously know. Well, then maybe I could share too, hey, I've encountered some difficulty as well. Or, that sounds like that's really hard. And honestly, I've never experienced that before, but I haven't experienced some hardship. Would you be interested to know, like, what's been encouraging and helpful to me? And then, and then again, I threw out a nugget, and then you're either going to say, yeah, well, what is it? Or, no, not really. And if you say no, not really, then I'm going to respect your boundary at that time. And maybe I'll just say, well, hey, thanks for being real with me. And I'm going to pray for you. Maybe you offer to pray in the moment. But then if you say, yeah, well, what's been a help to you? Well, then now I can start to share some of my story. And maybe I don't share the whole gospel with them at that moment, but I just tell them, hey, well, you've heard me say I go to church, right? And yeah, and I think just like going to church, and as I read the Bible, I get so much help, so much peace and comfort, even in the middle of all of this, because and then you just whatever's relevant in the moment. So look for opportunities, pray. That's why it starts with pray. Pray, and then invest, and you're investing in this relationship that's already there. Again, we're not talking about, I don't need to sit at Starbucks for weeks and look around and find which one of these strangers here looks like they might be my friend. Okay, now if in the middle of that, God tells you need to go tell this person about Jesus, you go do it. But that's not what we're talking about right now. What one thing we're trying to do is we're trying to make this as real and as tangible and doable as we can. So we pray, we invest in the relationship that we already have, and then we invite. And we invite to whatever makes sense for where the person is, what they're dealing with where our relationship is right now, and what God brings up in the moment.
Well, I think you mentioned talking about how the Bible has been meaningful and helpful. The next series that we're starting next Sunday is it's right down the middle of that. It's talking about God's grand story and looking at the structure of the Bible and what is the story that God is sharing through the Bible. And I remember hearing or reading some study that I think the number one reason that a person who already isn't going to church, why they would find church valuable, is that they came to a church and they heard a message explaining the Bible in a way that mattered to them. And can you give a little bit of a preview of this series? Because I think for the people that we might run into who have never picked up a Bible, they've only heard opinions about the Bible, and this might be a time when they're thinking, I've tried everything else, I've read a whole bunch of other stuff, but I don't really know what the Bible says myself. What's going to happen in this series so that as our people are inviting people, they know what they're inviting their friends to?
Yeah, a lot of times people's objection to the Bible is something they heard someone say about it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't
Yeah.
actually have their own experience with it. So our mission here at Hope Church is to invite people to discover and experience God's ways. One of the best ways that we can discover and experience God's ways is by reading God's Word, the
Mm-hmm.
Bible. So we're going to take a look at, with this series, it's God's Grand Story Volume 1. So we're going to be focusing in on the Old Testament, the first part of the Bible. And the Old Testament really lays a foundation that the New Testament is built upon. And there's some weird stuff in the Old Testament. There's some, stuff that doesn't make sense. If you read it, and you're like, what? And we're going to look at the overall storyline of the Old Testament so that we can get a better understanding of it. Because there is actually, you don't just pick it up and read starting in Genesis and then read all the way through to Malachi, which is the last book of
Mm-hmm.
the Old Testament. You don't read that like we would pick up a novel and read, chapter 1 to chapter whatever. There's actually a structure to the way the Bible is, particularly the Old Testament. We're going to explain some of that structure to help us understand how we could read to better understand the storyline. Then where do things like Psalms and Proverbs, where does that fit in? There's prophets. Well, where do the books of prophecy fit in? What's going on with those? What's that all about?
Yeah.
So we're going to be taking kind of this 60,000-foot view of the storyline of the Old Testament. Another one of the things that we're going to look at while we're going to go through the storyline fairly quickly, and then we're going to be stopping at different parts and looking at the story and seeing, how does it relate to our lives? How does it relate to us today in 2021? And then also we see Jesus all throughout the Old Testament. Now we see him in forms of imagery and foreshadowing, and
Right.
but that's part of the story that God has, is that basically the entire Old Testament is pointing towards Jesus, the one to come. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're going to be looking at.
Well, that'll be really good. I'm really looking forward to that series. And thank you for sitting down and talking a little bit more about our initiative to pray and invest and invite those that are around us to discover and experience God's ways. Thank you for tuning in to this Sunday Extra podcast. If you are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and would like to worship with us, you can find us at 10 o'clock in the morning this Sunday at 1750 Beach Street. That's at the corner of Beach Street and I-30 in Fort Worth, Texas. We would enjoy getting to worship with you. You can also find us online for worship on our website, hopechurch.com. We have all kinds of resources from this Invest and Invite message that will be in the show notes so that you can go find those as well. Things like, how do I share my story of what Jesus has done in my life? What are other ways that I can share what the Bible says about starting a relationship with Christ? We've got a page for that as well. A link to the Sunday morning message, all kinds of stuff. So we want you to be as resourced as possible so that as you are praying and investing, inviting the people in your life, you can do that and have success with that. So thanks for being a part of us. We look forward to worshiping with you in the future. And until we see you again, have a great week.